Good morning. The Committee of the Whole is called to order, but unfortunately, due to lack of quorum, we will stay on recess. I thank my colleagues that have joined me this morning, Senator Guåhan and Senator Parrish. We will return to recess. Thank you. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. We do have a quorum, but before we start, I'd like to ask my colleagues to recognize one of our colleagues. Today is his birthday. Also, it's his anniversary, and that's Senator Dwayne Nicholas.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dwayne. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, now let's get back to business. Senator Parrish, we are still on your amendment, and I know you have a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make the motion to withdraw the amendment and substitute it with a clean amendment. So
Okay.
it's currently being passed out.
Okay, we're gonna first entertain the motion to withdraw. Are there any objection? There being none, withdrawn. Now we're gonna accept, and you're passing out now the new amendment.
Yes.
Okay. Let's take a 1-minute recess or a couple minutes just to make sure all the colleagues have it, and we can work through this amendment. Committee holds called back to order. The amendment has been passed out. Senator Perez, if you can please read your amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues. So this amendment that I substituted, that I used as a substitute, basically removes the language of prior years and removes the position of program coordinator. So what this amendment does, it says, for all funds appropriated for fiscal year 2023 to Department of Revenue and Taxation that were not expended or allotted in fiscal year 2023 shall not lapse and shall be available until fully expended. Such funds carried over super are to be expended for personnel salaries and benefits, contractual services, professional development, and training for the support and in the implementation of the mandates of the compliance branch and the examination branch, including but not limited to the implementation of the tobacco stamp mandates and the procurement of tobacco stamps pursuant to 11 GCA Chapter 6, Article 8. So again, yesterday, the purpose of these lapse funds is to go towards those divisions within DRT that are really in need of support, and it's really to address many of the concerns too that we're seeing that have been, publicized, and including the public audit, which stated that we are leaking millions of dollars in uncollected taxes, such as from federal contractors, primarily on military construction projects, which is estimated to be at $22 million. And then there's also much publicized leakage in tobacco taxes. If I recall correctly, it's at least $20 million. So the investment that we put into these divisions can help recoup some of these tax leakages. And if you look at the staffing pattern, so if you have a revenue agent 1, which is about $40,000 in salary, that amount that we invest in a position like that can, if they are able to close the gap in these tax leakages, it definitely pays for itself many times over. And more importantly, the money that's coming in, so we all know the Healthy Futures Fund is, on a downward trend. And so should there be tax leakages there, it would go towards our most needed facilities, the health care in our community. So the work that DRT does is essential because it provides these services that our community really depends upon. And so I really ask for my colleagues' support to help our island, to do as Masi.
All right, thank you. Anyone who would like to comment to the amendment? A speaker?
Yes, if I could just ask OFB, I thought we brought this up at the budget hearing for DRT, but did they say they were going to fund the tobacco stamps? Or did you fund the tobacco stamps in their budget?
Senator, I'm not too sure. I need to check whether or not it was a line item in their budget request, and that whether or not we funded it. We just kind of basically funded, give them a lump sum, and let them basically have the opportunity to fund those programs if need be. But I can check whether or not we specifically did that.
All right, I remember in the last fiscal year, they said they were able to do it with some money from the Attorney General's office, that the Attorney General's office was giving them money that they had available so that they could purchase the stamps, and that was supposed to be done immediately. So it's very confusing why this is taking so long. I understand that the money from the Attorney General's office was withdrawn on the change of Attorney Generals or something. It was withdrawn, so it's no longer available to DRT, but still, this mandate has been in place for quite a while now, and it's disappointing that it's not funded yet or not implemented yet, I think is better. So I hope that this amendment will help that and just help in compliance overall. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Anyone else like to speak? Senator Tello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to my colleagues. Once again, happy birthday, Senator San Nicolas. I appreciate what the author of the amendment did by going back and addressing some of the concerns that the body had. We don't want to start creating other positions. We need to get this up and started because it was a bill that was passed by this body, signed by the governor, and we're obligated. However, I do know that there were some concerns that revenue tax, I believe, Mr. Chair, you might have spoken to the director that it was something that she didn't need, but unfortunately, Mr. Chair, the director has to recuse herself because she has a conflict of interest. So her comments to this has no bearing or no merit because she has to recuse herself. So I think that that being said, it's something that's it's a responsibility I think we need to do. I mean, not a lot of us are related to a lot of people on this island, so we do the right thing and step aside. But the law is clear. And again, I appreciate what the amendment has done by the author and take out that one particular area that we were concerned of. So again, I thank her for this amendment and definitely support the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Anyone else like to speak to the amendment?
Point of information.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so just in regards to the funding of the tobacco stamp program, I do recall in the public hearing that the response that it wasn't included in the budget. And I think part of the reason too is because the RFP wasn't released. So as of this time, the RFP has been released. So we can expect that should there be a vendor, that they would require funding. And so this is really key to making sure that this is carried out. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Parrish, for that information. Anyone else would like to speak to the amendment? I'm looking across. There are none. Are there any objection to this amendment? I see none. Senator Sinclair, you like to speak? No objection. Okay. There are no objections to this amendment, so would you like to close on this one, Senator Parrish? If not, I can go ahead and gavel down. Okay.
So yeah, I think, again, like I said in the opening statement, the money, the lapse funds that are there can go towards much needed services for DRT, which eventually is supporting the health of our community and other services that our community depends upon. So I ask for my colleagues' support, and thank you.
Thank you, Senator Parrish. There being no objection, motion passes. Now we'll move to the next amendment. At this point, page 62 is closed. We're now Bureau of Statistics, page 63. There are no amendments on page 63. It is now closed. I'm going slow. I'm just reading slow for some of you. I'm on page 64, Department of Public Works. I don't see an amendment. Yes, ma'am. You like to comment?
Yes, I have some questions. The village streets and roads resurfacing and repairs allocation last year was $2.2 million, and this year, or this budget proposal is $1.5 million. Just wondering if we could explain the decrease. Even the other part, the allocation from the highway fund was $2 million before, and now it's $1.5 million.
Yes, Senator. The 1.5 million that you've seen for FY24 is the amount that was reflected in their FY24 budget. So we went ahead and funded it accordingly. I do realize it was higher last year, in FY23, but if the department's requesting that amount, we normally fund it.
This is from the highway fund. So where did the rest of the highway fund go? To their normal operations?
Yeah, we did an allocation of the Guam Highway Fund, Senator. If you give me a moment, I'll try to find that allocation.
Thank you.
Senator, I'll go ahead and give you the allocation made from the Guam Highway Fund. For the DOA streetlight, you appropriated $811,077. For DPW operations, we appropriated $13,352,199. And for GPD Highway Patrol Division, we appropriated $2,366,200.
All right. So it's going, so the part that goes to DPW is going for their operations as opposed to what we did last year, which was put quite a bit of that towards village streets repairs or resurfacing. I think last year we also put in a provision for 10 million from the rainy day fund the prior year to Public Works for additional road surfacing. So they said at their public hearing, DPW said that thanks for the 10 million because they had used it to resurface village streets, and I think we are beginning to see those now. But how did we fund their operations last year without, and still allow for village streets repair in an additional $1 million? I know you told us that the Guam Highway Fund is reduced because of the liquid fuels tax reduction, is that correct?
In part, Senator, yes.
All right. Is there any, can we increase this allocation for village streets, I guess is my question, without impairing their operations?
Senator, first of all, the amount that we're appropriating in the highway fund is the amount they requested in their budget. If we are to go again and change the allocation, then that means we would have to change the allocation for the other agencies because we're going to pull from them. If I understand your question.
No, I mean, instead of instead of giving, we gave the highway fund 13 million to DPW, and then in subsection 2, we're allocating 1.5 million of that for village streets and roads resurfacing and repairs. And I'm just asking, can we allocate what we allocated last year, which was 2 million, instead of 1.5 million, without negatively impacting DPW's other operations?
We can, Senator. We're just going to have to reallocate within the 13.5 million that we gave them. Yes, You're absolutely right. We can do that.
And you think that, yeah, so I'd like to do that. I'm sorry, if OFB could just remind us, what other source of funding are they using for village street repairs if it's not this allocation?
I'm sorry, Senator, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, what other funding are they using for village street repairs if not this allocation?
For Public Works. You're referring to
Correct.
Public Works?
Yes.
Yes, Senator, what we've allocated basically for the Guam Highway Fund is the 10.3 million. If you redo the allocation for the Guam Highway Fund, what's going to happen, you're just going to reduce areas that we've already appropriated for. There's no other funding that they use for the Guam Highway Fund.
Yeah, so my concern is that by reducing it from 2.2 million last year, plus the 10 million extra that we gave them, to only 1.5 million this year allocated for village streets, that we won't see the progress that we're seeing in these resurfacing projects in the villages.
I mean, yes, that assumption could be correct, but because at their request, you know, the reduction was made by them, so we just went ahead and followed the reduction. But then again, you know, it's one of those things, and I'm sure there's still a lot of roads that need to be repaired out there. Why they made the reduction in this particular category, that's really up to Public Works. But as long as we give them that opportunity to adjust and move these monies around within the total amount that we gave them, there is a possibility that they can increase the allocation for this particular project and use.
I think what needs to be clear, Madam Speaker, is that if could DPW get a lump sum, if they wanted to move something to more road repairs, they'll just take it from their operation. They'll just make adjustment where they need to make adjustment.
Yes, I understand. I just don't want to go backwards. We did a lot to get this village streets, you know, all the balance of that fund in there, to get them even the excess money for last year. And I continue to hear from the mayors, right, at least some of them, that the streets that are being paved in their village are not their top 3 priorities. It's something else. And it was supposed to be their top 3 priorities every year, but I don't know. Yeah, I guess, Mr. Chair, I would like to make that amendment to change the 1.5 to $2 million.
Madam Speaker,
allocation only.
the amendment is closed. This is strictly only for comments. That's why I asked earlier.
All right.
I asked everybody to submit it. You can always proffer that amendment at later chapters.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone else on DPW? Page 64. There being none, page 64 is now closed. We are now on page 65, Guam Contractors License Board. Any comments? There's no amendments. Page is closed. We're now on the Guam Board of Registration for Professional Appeals Board. There are no amendments. That section is closed. We're now on the Guam Police Department. There are no amendments. Oh, correction. You, Senator Barnett, you do have an amendment. It's on page 68 and 70. I think it's in reference.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, could you just explain the zero general fund?
Where you at?
Sorry, no, never mind. That's fine.
Senator Barnett, we are now on Guam Police Department. You oversee. You have 2 amendments, but they're on page 68 and 70. Oh, that'll be later on DOC. So let's stick with this first amendment. If you can go ahead and read your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I first ask OFB to, because there was thankfully, I think, a significant increase in the Guam Police Department budget from last fiscal year?
Did you ask what the increase was?
And while Mr. Guerrero is doing that, I want to offer my congratulations to the 13th police officer trainee cycle, which is graduating tonight. Viva GPD.
But Senator Burnett, you're going to have to read your amendment. Then your
Yes,
question
sir.
will be added. So
Viva Betness, yes, sir. You got it, sir, Mr. Chair. Amendment is simple, very simple. To add a new 6th chapter 5 of the bill to read. 6, carryover. All funds appropriated for fiscal year 23 and prior fiscal years of the Guam Police Department that were not expended or allotted in FY23 shall not lapse and shall be available until fully expended.
Thank you, Senator Barnett.
Thank you, Mr.
Now
Chair.
the amendment. I mean, the question you posed to OFB to identify that the increase that GPD got, where are the increases at so that you would know where it's covered?
The total amount of increase over FY23, Senator, is $4.6 million.
You sure about that, Mr. Guerrero?
If we're talking from the general fund, Senator, yes. And when I get, and just for the body's information, when you ask me the increase, remember it's the increase between the FY23
Right,
general fund, not all fund sources, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. Can you tell me how much in lapses they're anticipating?
Again, Senator, I would have to go back and go into the system and look at it. When you talk about lapses, if we're talking about anticipated to the end of the year, that takes a little calculation. If you're telling me what the available balance is in your account, I can give you that today. But I can't tell you what the lapses are until typically at the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Anyway, on the amendment, I would just, I spoke with the chief of police this week, and he says they're all good with the budget. So it is what it is. No, they're good with it, but I just want to carry it over the lapses just in case. And so I'd ask for the support of my colleagues on this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Anyone would like to speak? Senator Tello, I saw your hand.
Thank you,
Ma'am?
Mr. Chair. You know, I've always been one to try to be fiscally responsible and put accounting where it's easy to understand and read and, you know where the money is going. And, you know, I'm not going to object to this amendment because, like I said, later on in the chapter, I have another amendment that will require the Guam Police Department to report to the legislature on where they're spending these lapses so that we can keep track of this. Unfortunately, we can't go back to prior years. You know, it'd be nice to know what they did to their prior years of lapses in 2021, 2020, you know, et cetera, down the line. I'm pretty sure it's quite a bit, but I just wanted to make that in for the record. Every time somebody puts a lapses like that, the importance of, you know, good accounting is to just not use a lapses and let it go back to the general fund, to other areas that have not been fully appropriated because they failed to spend their expenditures. But again, I'm comfortable because of an amendment. I'm hoping it passes that will require this reporting requirement. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, would the previous speaker like to amend my amendment and add her reporting requirements to it in the spirit of Biba Betness bipartisanship?
Yes, because that will be required because no amendment will be accepted. It's already open, so
Right,
if you want to make an amendment, we'll recess, make the amendment, make the changes.
No, Mr. Chair, I think I did look at some of the amendments prior this morning and noticed there's quite a bit of other agencies that want lapses for their agencies as oversights, and I spoke with legal. I think it's a lot easier just to do one amendment at the end in miscellaneous provisions that require all agencies receiving FY23 lapses that they have to report it, you know, to us. Every time they expend it, 30 days after expending it, they have to report it to the legislature. So, yeah, there's no need. This is a blanket one. I'm going to simplify it, which you like to do, Mr. Chair. Simplify things, and I've done that. So thank you, and thank the author for actually allowing me to tag on to his amendment, but I'm okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And the OFB would like to answer the question that was posed by Senator Barnett earlier so that everybody can hear what the information is. Steve, could you go ahead and you had some information you want to provide? Please share it with everyone else, even though I know the answers already.
Thank you. Spoiler alert, there's no lapses.
And that's why I asked the question, if they got the budget they asked for, don't ask for lapses. And it's good to always have just in case, right? No? But there's nothing to just in case if it's already gone. And especially when they got extra money. But anyway, Senator Barnett, you wanted to still continue with your amendment? Okay. Senator Duenas.
You know, Mr. Chair, first of all, thank you to OFB and yourself. I very much appreciative of the increase in budget for GPD. It's very well needed, very much needed, and I think it's really gonna, hopefully we'll turn the corner now in terms of recruitment of officers and getting more folks on the street, officers. You know, I want to take this opportunity here, maybe, Steve, to kind of get an understanding as I think you've put it very clearly and very succinct, that lapses are a demonstration of basically two things. One is the agency not being proactive on making sure that they do everything and they work with their team to use their funds, whether it requires procurement, whether it requires getting the front office to release their GG1s, whether it's whatever it is, good management by the manager to say, I've been given this budget, I've got a critical operation, and I'm going to make sure that my resources are able to be expended. But what I've noticed, Steve, and I wanted to see if you have kind of this same observation. When we carry forward lapses, you've discussed it very well on how basically the executive branch with a global budget basically across multi-agencies, as we're seeing right now, really has that cash management flow capability on a much larger scale than basically any other entities. And it's kind of interesting, and I want to see if you observe this with me. I mean, you can carry over lapses, you know, and then you're going to have to hope that there's cash, carrying over cash. And the idea that I'm trying to lay out here is, if you really think about it, every fiscal year you're kind of doing the same thing. It's almost like you're chasing your tail. Because the truth is, really all you're giving is appropriation authority that's going to be decided within the ceiling of the budget. And I say this, and I want to see if you agree with me, Steve, because I think managing expectations is important. You know, because sometimes we're going to beat our chest and say we did all of this, and then all of a sudden, if things aren't being realized, and at the end of the day, it's probably going to end up being a cash issue. Is that a proper observation, Steve?
You can say that, Senator. Again, like I said, a couple of things happen at the end of the year when we identify these lapses. One is, at the end of the year, we identify lapses as monies not spent against appropriation. That money normally will sit there until such time it's deemed that the actual expenditures against those appropriations that created the lapses are true and fact. And normally that happens during audit time to make sure. There are other times that you can identify these lapses and say, well, you know, during the course of the year, as we go through, we don't normally call them lapses, I refer to them as available balances, because the department still has the ability to utilize these monies until the end of the fiscal year. So it's money at their disposal. It's just a timing thing. Bureau budget, even during the time I was there, sets aside a certain percentage every year to ensure that the appropriations made in the budget bill actually do pan out to be actual revenues as we collect. Again, anything in excess of that amount we consider excess, and then later on when the audit is done, it's called surplus. But you're right, Senator. I mean, at any given time, whenever we authorize the carryover provisions of these departments into the next fiscal year, it's always an issue about cash. Because at the end of the year, we always say, we use the word excess, then it turns into surplus. But then again, we're talking about authority, you know, authority. You have the authority to spend this money during the 12-month period. After that, you didn't spend it, so this money becomes somewhat available sitting there. But it's also that this same money is also considered as surplus. It's also considered as money available for appropriation. You know, we just say it's there. No, not to say that and there is things in the government of Guam that which really creates a deficit are those unappropriated expenditures, things that happened during the fiscal year that there was no appropriation for it. But because of the urgency, because of the nature, because of a mandate that we didn't fund and that they have to spend for it, those are what tacked on into what we call the expenditure column of Guam for that fiscal. But yes, cash is always an issue. You can have cash today, but if you use that cash for other obligations or unappropriated expenditures, then that cash is no longer there, although the authority is still there.
Yeah, so I just, like I said, I'm not against the amendment. I mean, I think it's, obviously it's probably gonna be of no use if, I'm sure GPD is gonna use all their money. And I'm glad they are, because if any agency really should be using every penny, it's them. But, so I just wanted to make sure that as we go forward, I mean, I think it's our responsibility to continue to follow up with our areas of oversight as well, because even with previous amendments, I mean, we can say this money is designated for rev and tax to do this. It's up to the discretion of the director when they're going to basically send the orders down to whatever division, you know what I mean? You need to jump on this, you need to do this. So it's also important that regardless of what authority we believe we're carrying forward, it's really our job as well to kind of keep up with the mandates that we believe have been dictated by the legislature, and work with management to ensure that they're following through, because that's really where the rubber hits the road. I mean, we can talk dollars and cents all day long, but really it's the execution of the program that's the most important thing.
You know, Senator, just to respond, just to add a little bit more, I think everybody in this room would agree that every single department out there would love the opportunity to spend every cent of their appropriation. But it's not like that. It doesn't happen like that. And like I said, in the beginning of the fiscal year, by law, by October 15th of every fiscal year, departments and agencies are supposed to submit into the Bureau budget an allotment plan on how to spend their appropriation. Included in that plan is normally a reserve amount. It could be 5, 10, 15 million that they set aside. In other words, the department are not able to utilize those funds. But as we go through the course of the year and we start to generate these excess monies, I've always kind of like wondered, you know, why are those reserves still in place? If we're accessing money, there's no reason to hold the reserve anymore, because it's telling you we are on track to collect what we have appropriated. So therefore, these departments, and in all fairness to the departments, and I know it, departments want to spend their appropriation, but there's a lot of restriction that the administration places on the agencies, sometimes beyond their control. And we can't normally fault all the time the departments for not spending their appropriations, simply because there's guidelines, there's conditions that are placed on these appropriations by the administration, which is out of their control, that prohibits them from doing it. So, you know, I talk to the agencies, I've been there, I know how it works, and, you know, I feel for them. But at the same time, we got to put these budgetary positions in place to make sure that, you know, things materialize and pan out the way we're supposed to. But again, you know, I don't think there's one department out there that wouldn't want to maximize the total appropriation given to them, but they're just not available to do that.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to the global amendment. I think we can all agree on that, because that will give us the tracking. I mean, the bottom line is if we're going to do it, and it's going to be continuing, at least we know, you know, was the intent there built in that then when this carry forward comes forward, that you've exhausted that revenue from your lapses in order to stand up that program or support it. Because like I said, chances are it's going to be a reoccurring thing. The next budget year, you're going to come in, we're going to ask, you know, whether it's Steve or whether it's somebody else, what's tracking, right? And so it's this, right? It's a revolving fund. But we're going to feel good that we did the right thing. But the thing is that I think it's just as important to stay on top of what's going on. So I look forward to the global amendment, and at least we'll have more materials to work with when we're doing this process as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Senator Reyes. Also, we need to keep in mind that if there's no lapse, don't be asking why doesn't the department report it. No, there's nothing to report. So expect that. Moving along, does anyone like to comment to the amendment proffered by Senator Barnett? Senator, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Could I just ask OFB, what is the governor's request for GPD? Is this it?
The amount that's reflected in the 24 budget, Senator, is the amount that was requested by the executive branch.
Okay, because although you pointed out that it's about $4 million increase in general fund appropriation, the highway fund appropriation was cut in half from 4.8 to 2.3. So the overall total appropriation to GPD is only 1.6 million over last year, right?
Yes.
But that's what the governor requested for GPD. So, and you're saying they might not have any lapses?
Senator, just to clarify, the total amount is correct, but the allocation, what we did was we kind of switched it out because if you look in the executive budget, I believe they allocated 2.5 million out of the TAF. Again, you know, I didn't want to utilize any special funds beyond what these funds are intended to be used for. So what we did is I went ahead and shifted the TAF monies out of GPD, put it back into the TAF and utilized the general fund to fund it.
All right, yeah, so but the total's still 1.6 million over last year.
Yes, ma'am.
And then does this fund additional cycles?
Yes, it does, Senator.
So the 1.6 million additional covers their pay raises, or well, just the civilian pay raises, I guess, in that department, plus how many more cycles?
The appropriation, Senator, does cover the civilian GPP increases and also the 40 recruits for the cycle.
One cycle in FY2024. That's
Yes,
what we're
ma'am.
anticipating.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I just noticed that the 1.6 million, I was comparing it to some of the other departments, and some of the other departments get this same amount. I mean, there's hardly anyone who got less than this because of the pay raises, I guess. And yeah. Did we pass a law regarding cycles, how many cycles we have to have every year?
I believe the legislature did pass a law. I believe it was introduced by Senator Moylan that required that I believe GPD, Guam Fire, Customs, Quarantine were supposed to hire X amount of FTEs every year for the next 3 or 4 years. That particular law, Senator, did not indicate any fund source. It just mandated the government that these cycles would happen. And of course, you know, that's what really actually pumped up the level of these agencies over the last couple of years because of that mandate.
Okay, so that's, I guess, I appreciate what you have done here. My only concern is that we're funding one cycle that's 40 people. I'm not sure that that meets all of GPD's needs or our community's needs, but all right, thank you. I support the amendment for the lapses. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else like to comment on that? Even though there's no lapses, but anyone like to comment? There being none, are there any objection to this amendment? There being none, amendment passes. We will now close Guam Police Department, page 67 and 68. We are now on page 69, Department of Correction. Senator Barnett, you do have an amendment? Almost identical to the last.
Same amendment, Mr. Chair.
Okay. If you
No,
could please
instead
read
of
it
Guam
out.
Police Department, it says Department of Corrections.
And you still have to read the amendment.
I do.
Even though
yes.
it's the same.
Stand by, Mr. Chair. Just in case, again, Tatlo and BI. Page 70, add a new 5, chapter 5 of the bill to read, carry over all funds appropriated for FY23 and prior fiscal years to the Guam Department of Corrections that were not expended or allotted in FY23 shall not lapse and shall be available until fully expended. Same intent as the previous amendment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Burnett.
Okay, thank you,
And
sir.
I'll have OB
Right.
comment
Thank
to
you.
the lapses.
Could you also just explain the slight increase in DOC's budget from last fiscal year?
Yeah, and before you start with that, start with the lapses if there's any. I just want to make sure it's very clear.
Okay, I'll just go back to FY22. At the end of the year, they recorded a $475,000 shortfall, and this year we are tracking about $1.6 million shortfall. Again, I just want to emphasize that most of the law enforcement, specifically Guam Police, Guam Fire, and DOC, normally and historically have always been short in their appropriations simply because of one thing, the overtime. It is very difficult to project and budget for overtime simply because it fluctuates. And I believe this body in the past, not particularly this body, but the legislature, has always kind of like, want to put a cap on overtime to kind of like restrict the use of the overtime unless it's absolutely necessary. But when the agencies start to reflect the true amount of overtime they're spending, we're talking about $3, $4, $5 million annually. And I don't think the legislature has ever appropriated funds in that amount for overtime. So we normally leave it up to the agencies to manage their appropriations and really keep the overtime down. But sometimes it's almost difficult. You got guys calling in sick, they don't want to work, whatever have you. That just causes the overtime just to skyrocket.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone like to comment on the amendment? The speaker?
Yes,
Ma'am?
thank you. Could I ask, does the appropriation to DOC cover another cycle as well? And how many people?
Yes, Senator, the FY2024 budget level does include funding, as you mentioned, 1.9 million increase, both for the GPP, which is again for civilian employees, plus a full cycle of 20 officers.
20 officers in FY24, that's what they're going to get. So,
Yes, ma'am.
so it's likely they will be incurring overtime for sure again.
Again, the thought in theory and the reason why I believe, the law was passed by Senator Moylan is that he was thinking that the more people you put on board, supposedly, it's supposed to cut overtime. But one of the biggest problems we're seeing in the law enforcement is that they go through these training cycles, people graduate and stuff like that, but the retention is where their biggest problem is. People will stay on a year, 2 years, and then all of a sudden transfer out of the agencies to go somewhere else. And it just kind of leaves the agencies right back to where they were 1, 2, 3 years ago. So the cycles are continuing. We fund them every year, but unfortunately, the overtime, as you mentioned, is supposed to concurrently go down, but it normally maintains simply because of the loss of these people over the next year or 2 years.
Are the cycles of DOC and GPD, they cost the same? I mean, if they were the same amount of people?
I believe the training is the same. I think they all go through the Belaya program. And my understanding is the applicants actually pay the cost of the Belaya program, and then later on, I think they're reimbursed, something to that
So
nature.
if we're funding one cycle of 20 people, what would it cost to fund one cycle of 40 people? Or what is it costing us to fund the one cycle 40 people at GPD?
Okay, let me find that out. Because if you were going to double it, it would just be double that amount, but let me find out the cost of the cycle.
Okay.
Point of information, Mr. Chair. Point of information,
Yes, sir. Point of information, Senator Blas.
and I appreciate the inquiry by the speaker. However, with regard to the training, up until your basic, your Belaya, your basic law enforcement, the technical aspect of whether it be Guam Police Department or the Guam Department of Corrections, it's totally different. It varies, different functions. So you're going to find disparity or some significant changes in as far as what it's going to cost to be able to do this. As long as well with the timeline necessary for the probationary period. Mr. Chair, I'm speaking to the choir. We know what it's like, and so when you try to do an apples to apples comparison, it's very difficult past the standard, the basic. After that, their GPD's training cycles, training budget, it's going to be exorbitantly more than what you would have at DOC. So just as a point of information with regard to that.
Yes, and the same thing is, I'm not even too sure what the probation period is, because I know in GPD, it's 1 year. I don't know if the other law enforcement are the same 1 year. And sometimes within that 1 year, they could lose them to another agency. Steve, do you have the information you could provide?
Yes, Senator. The cost of running 20 recruits for DOC is approximately about $1 million. So for 20 recruits, if we're going to do 40, of course, you just probably double that to 2 million.
All right, thank you very much. I support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Tello?
Just real quick, Mr. Chair, once again, I have no problem with this amendment because at the end of the chapter, I have a provision in there that requires a reporting requirement of all excess revenue that, or lapses that an agency receives will be reported to. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? There being none, are there any objections to this? And we can just wrap this one up. Madam Speaker, you already spoke, so I don't think you need to close, Senator Barnett. There being no, are there any objections? There being none, motion passes. Now, page 16.
Sorry, on DOC, can OFB just tell us how many cycles did DOC request for FY24? Just one? That's their request? All right, thank you.
We have now closed page 68 and
Mr. Chair.
70.
Mr. Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I raised my hand. I hope you didn't close DOC yet.
No, I'm going to do it right now. While you,
I have a question. Yeah.
oh, you have
Point
a
of inquiry.
Oh, okay, point of inquiry.
Yeah, this is for OFB. So I saw in the paper recently they did a solicitation for the construction, IFB, I believe it was an IFB solicitation for the construction of a new facility. So what is the plan? I guess if they do get a vendor or a construction company to bid on it and they approve it, you know, how much are we, I believe, what was the amount that we have to set aside every year for the construction?
Senator, I'm not privy to any of that information, nor was it even mentioned in our budget talks with GPD. So again, you know, it's, I mean, DOC, again, as far as the 24 budget is concerned, that was not considered.
Okay, maybe the question for the chair too, because I do recall in past budgets, we did, you know, the hospital as well as the Department of Corrections.
Right.
Do you recall the amount that we
Yes,
were supposed to set aside?
what we set aside was $5 million for them to go to GITA, go out to the bond market. If they're kicking out, if they're putting out an IFB, they're trying to find out what it's going to cost. And at the same time, they were also advised, reduce your cost, because when they go to the market of $5 million a year, they're only going to get about $70 or $80 million. And their project was for, I think it's 160. And the reason why was it was going to be very, very nice. But see, what they're trying to do is, and this is what I've been stressing to them is, folks, get your act together, take a look at what you got, what you need, and then start planning that and get with GITA. And probably that's why they're asking for an IFB. Find out what's out there. Because an IFB is for information. Find out who's willing to consider them. It's not really a lock-in to a contract.
Okay, yeah, I'll look back and see, but I believe it was a solicitation. So,
Okay, yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. That being said, page 68 or 69 and 70, DOC is now closed. We are now on page 71, Department of Agriculture. Any comment? Because there is no amendment. Yes, Senator Barris.
Yeah, I have a question too regarding this. I remember during the public hearing, Department of Ag was counting on the funding from previous pots of money to fund, I believe, it was GAIN and I think conservation officers. And I just want to ask Steve, did you ever resolve whether that money's available for them? Because I believe they were counting on it, and the budget didn't outline any others. It didn't increase it. They didn't include it in their budget other than what was listed in that footnote.
Yes, Senator. In the conversation we had with them, you know, it was money they were requesting whether or not they could receive. But at that point in time, there was no funds identified for the particular hiring of the conservation officers. And I believe even the purchasing of vehicles was included in that conversation. And I just told them at this point in time, there's none. But in the FY24, we did address the concern in the FY24 budget. And I think we did allocate $100,000 to agriculture for the animal health and control. program. We did fund 100,000 to them.
So 100,000 for animal control. So how
Yes.
many conservation officers is that? And I know they have a contract too.
We appropriated 200,000 at the request of the department for the conservation officers for 24.
So that includes their contract with GAIN, or no? Or just conservation officers?
No, just the conservation officer, Senator.
Because I know they do subcontract or contract with GAIN for other services. Is that included as well?
Yeah, the contract again is separate, apart from agriculture appropriation, and I think for FY2024 we appropriate about 142,000 for that contract.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. There being no amendment on this agency, comments?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, if you could just, in last year's budget, there was a provision that said such sums appropriated in this subsection is authorized for use as local matching requirement for federal grants and aid. Do we need that in this year's budget or not? Or is there another provision that allows for that?
Senator, in their FY24 request, there wasn't a request actually for any local match for federal dollars. In the past, you know, they've actually had the need to appropriate general fund or at least local match for their federal grants, but I believe in FY24 they did not ask for any local appropriation.
Thank you. Do you think they lost their grants or?
Yeah, either they lost the grants or expires, or they don't anticipate to request for any new monies requiring local match.
All right. Thank you.
That being Senator Brown, on comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask, what are the current number of conservation officers that we're funding, and are we adding on any additional conservation positions? We used to have like 22, so where are we now?
Give me a moment, Senator, I'll get you the answer.
Thank you.
Senator Brown, 23. No, just easy. No, but if you notice in the budget, they want us to put in, I guess they're doing that conservation reserve.
We have
force.
8.
That's why they got 200,000. They wanted to, they're almost like DOC.
Senator, the answer to your question is currently there are 8 conservation officers on board, and there is 1 currently in progress of recruitment.
And how many positions, do they have any vacancies that are funded for this year? Because again, that's tremendously understaffed. I mean, if we have an extra 100 million this year and yet, you know, we have less than half the capacity that we used to have, that's concerning.
In the staffing pattern, they indicated 4 vacant positions, but they did not fund it.
Okay, well, that's something to take note of. Maybe we can work on that because, again, they're highly understaffed in that operation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown. There are no other comments for Department of Agriculture, page 71 and 72. That's now closed. We are now on page 73, which is the Guam Public Library System. Any comments for the library? Because there are no amendments. There being, Senator Parrish, you want to talk about the library?
Yeah, I just want to also let the, the body know that the public library system under the director Serenkin is is doing amazing work. He was actually chosen for the Library of Congress to manage not just Guam, but the area in regards to increasing access to online services. And so I really appreciate all the work that he's done. And I think, you know, I'm looking to increase also the access to early, basically, youth from birth. Actually, so there's a gap that exists for services below 5 years of age, so birth to 5, and I think he's interested in increasing access so we can improve literacy. So there's this thing called 30 million word gap that's happening in our households that are basically the idea is that, you know, children that don't have access to reading materials or have access to services enter school. They're not ready for school because they don't have that built-up literacy. And so I think what he's doing is very critical to help build up our, you know, to improve the education, the accomplishments and achievements of our youth before they even enter school, because a lot of that language development happens very early on before they enter school. And I think what he's doing, we need to support. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Also, I'd like to also let everybody know that the library is trying to work on the e-books. Everybody come and get your library card. You can go in the line and get e-books. Just want to mention that. And the librarian that's there in the past, folks that asked me, why don't you fund the director? No, I would need a librarian, not a director. We need somebody to work the library. And that's how we did it, and thank God that librarian came from one, I think JFK or one of the schools, and he was recruited as the librarian.
Yeah, another point of information, so their libraries are not open 7 days a week. In fact, they don't have enough money to actually keep the libraries open. And so if we can find more funding to support that, you know, I think that would go a long way. But you're right, the director has been working with DOE librarians. He was a former librarian, and now he's the director, and they're very appreciative of the e-books. And so now they're using this modern technology to ensure that at lower cost too, and it's well received. They do have a bookmobile too, by the way, which is also well received in the communities, and I believe they have one van or two vans, but yeah, to go to these out of reach places. So I think access is really critical, and you know, I think we need to boost the services. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any hands for any other comment for the library. Page 73 is now closed. We are now on page 74, DYA. There are no amendments, but there are hands for comments. Senator Duenas, then you'll be followed by the speaker.
Sidus Masim, Mr. Chairman. Steve, what was the governor's request on Department of Youth Affairs?
Close the way. No more kids.
Total amount requested in the executive budget, Senator, was $8.7 million. If you want the exact, it's $8,679,935.
Okay, and that's inclusive of the $200,000 for youth programs and the $619 for summer youth training?
Yes, yes, I'm showing you, yes.
Because I'm wondering if that's the difference between the general, but you got the total.
We
So
made
is
it.
that just a breakout of the 200,000 and the 619?
That's correct, Senator. It's inclusive, yeah.
I just wanted to say that Department of Youth Affairs is very fortunate. During my time, this is a 110% increase in general fund appropriation. And so I'm happy, very, very happy. I know they're doing good work up there. I know that they have done some, you know, continuation of work with CPS and shoring up some of those duties and responsibilities, as well as I understand they've done some work also up at the foster care home. So I'm glad to see this budget for youth affairs. Like I said, this is very, very I could have run 2 DYAs with this But I'm happy that they need the money, and it is definitely a very worthy organization, and I'm glad they have this budget level. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Anderson. Just for the information for the colleagues, Senator Anderson is the former director of DYA, and he was struggling for even the college homes because I know my nonprofit organization was supporting him in what they were doing. Madam Speaker, you're next for comments for DYA.
Yeah, I'm
page
just
74.
curious. It's like a $2 million increase from FY23 versus only $1 million increase for GPD and DOC.
Again, Senator, it's not so much the increases that we're looking at. It's basically the need of the agencies almost bare minimum. I can give you the breakdown of the 2 million. Of the 2,503,000 was for the GPP. The contractual service was 200,000. We refunded the recruitment of. There is funding for the recruitment of 10 positions, which is 650,000. And we also funded the vacancies for the Youth Correction Division at 600,000.
What is that last one?
The Youth Correction Division?
That's new?
No, it's existing, Senator.
So, but why the increase then? My understanding was that their population has significantly decreased with the reform of juvenile justice.
Give me a moment, Senator, I'll get you the answer. Yes, Senator, the position titles are youth service worker positions within the program, and we funded, I believe, 6 of them.
So an additional 6 of those types of workers for FY24, that's
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
that's in the correctional unit?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Does anyone else like to comment? If not,
I
point of
just wanted to
information?
do a point of information on
Yes.
that, because I have been talking to some of the council and case management. Those youth service workers also serve in the community centers.
Yep.
So they're portable between youth corrections. It just depends on what the demand is out there in the centers. One of the reasons why we are having some, reasonable successes, it's that after-school care program and the programs that those YSWs are interchangeable between corrections and also out in community corrections, which is basically doing the case management, trying to keep those kids out of the correctional facility based on what they do in the centers. And so I do know that that's one of the reasons why they were requesting some additional help with that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. No one else for comments. Page 74 is now closed. That's DYA. We will now go to the Guam Environmental Protection Agency, and we have Senator Parrish. You have an amendment.
Yes, Mr.
If you
Chair.
can go ahead and properly read the amendment, please.
Yeah, I need to actually bookmark this section because I'm waiting on EPA to get feedback before I do this. But
Okay, let's bookmark then page 75. My colleagues, just to keep you informed, we are already now at the halfway mark on the budget of 150 pages. Let's take a quick recess at this time, at least 5 minutes. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. My colleagues, a reminder that page 75, which is the Guam Environmental Protection Agency, has been bookmarked. Move now to page 76, Department of Labor. There is no amendments on page 76. Anyone want to comment? If not, we'll go ahead and close that. No comments? Close. Department of Labor is closed. That's 76 on page 77. We are now in Department of Parks and Rec. There's no amendment. Madam Speaker?
Yes, so it looks to me like the total increase for the Department of Parks and Rec is only about like 400, 500,000, something like that. Less than $1 million for sure. Maybe, what is it? The total.
1 second. They're pulling it up right now. And Ms. Llewellyn will speak.
I have 308. Okay. Yes, Speaker. The difference is about 500,000, and it mainly consists of their GPP. That's about 380,000.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was glad to see that they got an increase, but if it only covers the raises, then my concern is on subsection 3. Subsection 3 is the amount that's dedicated to the repair and maintenance of public restrooms and pool facilities. And so this amount, 150,000, is the same as FY23. And I just think from a layman's perspective, woefully inadequate, right? I mean, they have testified how many actual facilities they have, and this cannot be enough for that. With this amount, they couldn't even contract it out to supplement their in-house work. And we've seen the facilities. So I know that the Tourist Attraction Fund had helped in this regard for certain facilities, but definitely not all. And I'm just wondering if there's any other parts of the budget that might address that in OFB's perspective. Otherwise, this is just too low.
Not from our knowledge.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I just asked to bookmark DPR? Thank you.
I was hoping you'd say that. We're going to bookmark page 78, which includes 78
and 79. And if I could just put this question out there for page 79, it's the Guam Historic Resources Division is getting less than what it received in FY23. That's it received 628, and in that special allocation last year, this one is 779. That's also an issue, so I'm glad we're bookmarking this area. Even the patrol officers for the territorial parks is only 90,000. How many officers is that? Or is this not for the officers? The payment, oh, this is for the civilian. Okay, sorry, this is for the civilian. That's fine. All right, thank you.
All right, anyway, Department of Parks and Rec, page 78 and 79 is bookmarked. We'll come back to that. Otherwise, we'll move to the Department of Land Management, which is page 80. Just to advise everybody, we don't have any other amendments until page 87. Okay, so we're on page 80, Department of Land Management. Are there any comments? There being none, page 80 is closed. Okay, we're now on page 81. Chief Medical Examiner. That's probably just his salary. No. Okay, being there are no comments, no amendments.
This is
Yes, ma'am.
63% increase though, from 432 to 707,000. That could just be explained.
They're pulling it up right now, ma'am.
Yes, so this increase is due to the GPP, a recruitment in progress, and increase in contractual and utilities. So,
Are those contractual and utilities significant, or is it mostly the GPP?
no, it's the recruitment in progress was about 160,000, and then the contractual also increased about 100,000.
What's that for? Oh, is that for like no, what is that for? Sorry. So they'll be hiring more employees at this, at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner for the 160K?
There's various contracts. Some significant ones were 40,000 increase for a GMH MOU, work requests. We have about 25,000 for microbiology laboratory services, and another 10,000 for consulting contracts. We have website services, so it's different category.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. No other comments for the page 81, Guam Medical Examiner, or Office of Chief Medical Examiner. It is now closed. We are now on page 82, Custom and Quarantine Agency.
sorry.
Ma'am, yes, ma'am.
Can we take a recess on before DOC? I mean, before customs.
Before customs?
I'm sorry.
Or you want to go back to the Chief Medical Examiner first? We're
No,
not
no,
done?
no,
or-
it's okay.
We're good?
Yeah, thank you.
Custom and Quarantine, there are no amendments? No comments? Ma'am? They do have a
Yes.
cycle.
This is very concerning because the general fund gives them maybe $1 million more, and then a total increase of, I don't know, just if you look at the Customs and Quarantine Inspection Services Fund, last year it was $2 million, now it's $6 million, but isn't this the fund that has been severely tracking so low? They've been unable to meet these amounts. And I just want to know, so are you confident in this tracking? And what happens if they don't make that special fund amount? I just remember DOC Customs coming in here saying they're not getting their amounts and they're having all kinds of issues.
Well, from our projections, the reason why the Customs Quarantine Inspection Fund has increased is based on trend and what we're expecting for tourist arrivals for next fiscal year. And if they do fall short, like in times past, the general fund would have to cover shortfalls.
All right, is that what happened and is happening now in FY23?
I'm not too sure. I'm not sure at the moment.
All right. Is the increase in $2 million also going to fund cycles for customs?
Yes.
I know in their budget they talked about they're in a cycle right now, or they have a recruit in
Correct.
progress, and then they want one more cycle in FY24?
Yeah, it fully funds a cycle. So if you see, we funded the Customs about 546,000 more than the governor requested, because in Customs hearing, budget hearing, they mentioned that they inadvertently left out 10 recruitment in progress that they have. So we funded that.
Okay, great. So you're funded the recruitments, all of the recruitments in progress, plus one more cycle.
Correct.
Of how many people? 40?
20.
20 only? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Brown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment because, you know, with Customs, as I said, this along with the Guam Visitors Bureau and the TAF, as their revenues continue to increase with regards, and that is the desired hope with the Inspection Services Fund, again, in the future, I think we'd like to see that offset by the general fund. Obviously, as a result of the pandemic that adversely impacted our visitors coming into the island, the general fund has been subsidizing Customs. And previously, the decision had been made to move Customs to more self-sustaining operations. So I want to take note of that because there are other critical needs in the general fund money to fund other critical operations of this government that do not generate revenue. So I certainly don't want them to be in a situation, while I recognize they are challenged at this time, where they become dependent permanently moving forward on general fund monies to operate.
Thank you, Senator Brown. Any other one who'd like to comment on Customs? If not, yes, you have the oversight chair. And then you'll be followed by Senator Paris. We're on page 82.
Thank you. You know, I just thank the good work of OFB in working with their budget and their budget requests and allowing, you know, Customs to work through their difficulty they're having. When I was a Customs officer, as their supervisor, you know, I witnessed firsthand, you know, losing our Customs officers to the feds, you know, because we cannot be as competitive with their wages. There are a lot of good men and women working up there, you know, keeping the island safe. I could say that directly because, and honestly, why? Because I was actually there. There are good men and women up there. And we are working real closely with the director and the folks up there to try to make sure that, yes, they do become sustaining with the types of revenue they can generate with, you know, their fees and stuff. So I ask my colleagues to please keep Customs intact, and I've always promised them that you know, we lose a lot of officers up there, and hang in there, things will get better, hang in there, things will get better. And so me being here, I hope that I can lend a hand and encourage our colleagues here to do the same. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Madam Vice?
Yeah.
And then Senator Paris. Yes.
Si Diyos Masi, Mr. Chair, and Manana Si Diyos, I too want to just rise in support of this section provision of the law as it relates to Customs and quarantine, share the same sentiment as the retiring speaker, who I think is the oversight chair, if I'm correct. I want to say that working closely with them, we do know that we have proposed legislation as it relates to the HS, which is the harmonized system, something that Guam is the only one that doesn't have, and everyone else of our brothers and sisters in Micronesia and the Blue Continent already have in place. But when we talk about trying to get additional resources, additional federal grants and all that, it's all about compiling the data and getting the data and working on the system that they're going to need, and also working closely with the Oceania Customs and quarantine, and just getting a lot of, doing a lot of networking and leveraging with what we have, and working with the administration. I know that we're going to be looking at trying to get more resources and giving them the tools that they vitally need. So I hope to get that legislation. I'm just waiting for legal's review on the technical components, but the resources here should stay, hopefully stay intact, and then we can look for additional resources. And I want to thank the Oversight Chair for giving me the opportunity to work closely with him, as we had proposed legislation since 2 years ago in the HS. But again, because of that, we will be looking for additional funding from both the national level and the regional, international level. So, sign them off, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Senator Paris?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I echo the sentiments of the previous speaker that, you know, they're undergoing a huge overhaul in regards to more networking within the Micronesian area. So automation is a big thing. In addition to, I guess I have a question for OFB in regards to, you know, we did pass legislation last term regarding extending the opportunity for customs to procure satellite scanning or scanning capabilities to increase their capacity to inspect more containers. Was that included in the budget as far as contractual services for that?
Steve, do you have an answer for that?
Give me a moment, Senator. Get you an answer.
Let's take a quick recess, a short recess at this time. Is called back to order. Senator Burrs, if you can ask that question one more time so that everybody's reminded what the question was, so that OLB will give the response.
Yeah, the question was there money in the budget that was set aside for the procurement of scanning infrastructure?
Thank you, Senator. I'm not too sure if this is part of that standing infrastructure, but there is an appropriation that we set aside in the FY2024 budget for a ZBV X-ray maintenance repair, and I think that's what they requested in their 24 budget for any type of, I believe, X-ray, whatever it is. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm not too sure what that is. If that's the same thing.
Again, that's what they requested in the budget. I mean, I could do a real quick call and find out if that's the same as what you're referring to as a standing X-ray
maybe we can
machine.
figure that out. Hopefully they, I mean, obviously this is there's a timeline for this public law that we just extended. So I guess the sooner they get this equipment in, if this is exactly the one that would comply with that law, the better, right?
They're looking at the public law to see. As a matter of fact, Senator Perez, they're communicating with Customs to find out if it's consistent with the law.
Okay.
Because on many occasions, public laws are passed. This is what they need, and then they don't do it, and then they do something else. But because things change. But we'll work with it. It's 11:05 right now, so are we getting close to the answers, OLB? So if not, just waiting for a response.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can get the answers at 2.
That being said, we'll go ahead and recess until 2 o'clock to get your answer. Make sure that Customs is able to give the answer that you need, and we'll just ask a bunch of other questions. And if you can, just ask OLB on the site, and we'll get some more answers. So see you all back at 2 o'clock. We're in recess till 2 o'clock.